Hello, I am C. Paul Singh, President Nisbat. I welcome all the delegates and the learned speaker who have come to join us on this 125 edition of our webinar, Public Perception on Corruption in Criminal Justice System. I am sure the delegates who have come to join our session will enjoy the deliberation and carry home a lot of points which will come during the course of deliberation. With these words, I'd like to introduce NISBAT. NISBAT was established in 1990 and started training courses in the field of private security, safety, security management, and applied technology. We also conducted courses for the Ministry of Defense, Government of India, for the Defense Forces' second career in the private security industry. After some time, we also launched certain courses for training of teams in risk management, as well as security audits and due diligence. Our trained teams did commendable work in various multinationals and created a name for themselves as well as for the institution from where they were trained. To take it further, NISBAT now aspires to become an international institute and a think tank in the field of security, safety, applied technology, and management. With this purpose in view, we have created 4 sectors or 4 wings in NISBAT. The first is NISBAT Forum. NISBAT Forum conducts various webinars, conferences, debates, speeches by scholars and eminent personalities. And this webinar is being conducted by NISBAT Forum. The next is the NISBAT Academy. The NISBAT Academy is supposed to conduct training courses in these subjects. And then we have the NISBAT Enterprise, which will create multinational alliances and launch audits and surveys. In the end, we have got the 4th one is the NISBAT Foundation. The NISBAT Foundation, we intend to create a trust, and this foundation will also go in for the purpose of benefiting the society in terms of these fields, that is security, safety, and audit, because nowadays the security and safety is a great concern, and our foundation will approach the society at large, let us say Resident Welfare Association, others, and conduct certain programs for the benefit of the society at large. And for this, we are not going to charge social work. Now, these words I like to introduce Mr. Pawanjit Ahluwalia, the chairman and the moderator of this session. Mr. Pawan Ahluwalia is an ex-parachute regiment officer. He sought retirement at a very early age and came into the business and launched his own business enterprise. Today, with his attitude of perseverance, his attitude also of humility, not only perseverance, humility also, and always in the process of learning, even from the pitfalls, he has achieved a position of prominence in the business world of not only India, but Southeast Asia. He is humble, but he seeks constant improvement in his business organization, and under his belt, a number of business organizations today are working. He is a founder member of the International Business Research Association, Hong Kong, and is also a member of the World Association of Detectives, USA. Further, he is the past president and former chairman of the Council of International Investigation, USA, and is an awardee of Malcolm Thompson Award, as well as Kotalia Award by the Council of International Investigation. Shri Pamanjit Ahluwalia shall moderate this session. With these words, I'd like to introduce a few words on the subject. That is, I want to open the subject of criminal justice system. Now, every day we hear from petty bribery to large-scale corruption, we feel and are made to understand is rife in the criminal justice system in many countries, and in India more so. Now, it is a serious, very serious implication it has for the human rights of any individual. The chain of corruption in the criminal justice system starts, they say, from police, and then to the prosecution, and then to the judiciary, and then to the prison system also. Now, corruption in police forces, acts of corruption by police forces have shaken, the public faith in the police. In order to understand corruption in the police, the core factors which I feel are that police sometimes misuses, I would call, the powers to arrest and to extort money. There are also bribes, I must say, reported bribe cases where they are paid to prevent torture to the accused. Victims or his family may even have to pay bribes to follow up the cases with the police or to say them that to hurry up the cases. Reasons for this sort of prevailing corruption, as they call, are many. These reasons the police can be at the recruitment stage we are not careful, or at the training stage we are not careful, or there is a lack of resources, or there is a lack of accountability, or some deficiencies in the laws, or there may be some cultural problems also, but they all are there. Besides that, still, we have to see why this image of police is being tarnished. Now, corruption in the judiciary, there are allegations of corruption in the judiciary, they are always mentioned in a very hushed tone. These allegations some years back were brought out. I remember the case when Justice Markandeya Singh Katju mentioned about, he was distressed and mentioned about the corruption in the High Court of Allahabad. In the court hearing cases and appeals, the detainees have to pay to get it expedited. Now, executive delays are there, but all the time I must mention that these excessive delays are not only because of the rampant corruption, but also there are certain systematic defects in the legal processes as well as in the laws. That one side, I'll just refer for the information of the audience, the Article 23 of the Constitution gives rise to silence, in fact, I would call it. No person who is accused can be of an offense, can be made to compel to give evidence against himself. Then presumption of innocence is another part in the Evidence Act, that you have to presume a person is innocent till he is proved guilty. Then the burden of proof lies with the prosecution. So most of the laws, both substantive as well as procedural, they were enacted about 100 years back. While criminality has undergone a lot of changes, ongoing organized crime, terrorism are a matter of great concern for all of us and for particularly prosecution and the state. Then, in fact, the entire criminal justice is oriented in favor of accused, as we all know. The prison system, when you come there, also this is a rampant corruption, although this is not very evident to the public. Detainees sometimes are involved in the cases of corruption by having gang inside the prison. So at times the prison guards have been reported to smuggle contraband products inside. So all along, starting from the police to the prosecution, to the judiciary, to the prison, it is supposed to be having rampant corruption or is alleged to have rampant corruption. The tackling corruption is a different thing. There are cases where they have tried to tackle with the penal section available in Indian Penal Code and tackle it, the corruption with the Prevention of Corruption Act, Criminal Law Amendment Act, and also Prevention of Money Laundering Act, etc., Foreign Exchange Act. Despite all these laws, this demon of corruption is still very active. And a fight against corruption does not seem too easy. Keeping in view this, we have started this particular, we are going to have this particular webinar. What is the public perception about corruption in the criminal justice system. Ladies and gentlemen, the definition of corruption, I will not go to detail, but use of one's public position, use of discretionary power, use of authority for personal gain, collusion and conniving with the corrupt is also a corruption. With these words, I pass on the proceedings to the moderator, that is Mr. Pamanjit Talia, to carry it forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sipal Singh. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of people from the following countries. India, definitely, the United States, Singapore, Kenya, China, France, Guyana, Pakistan, Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, and the United Kingdom. I'd also take a minute to thank the sponsors of today's webinar. Tag Scores is the principal sponsor, which is an online examinations platform. The event is supported by Premier Consulting and Investigations Limited, which is an investigation and consulting firm. Supported by Premier Shield Private Limited, which is a security solutions company. And India Skills, which does examinations for assessing competency in the Skill India mission of the Government of India. And GMD Cargo, which is a logistics company. I'd like to introduce our illustrious president, Mr. Sipal Singh. Mr. Sipal Singh is a master's in English literature. He has served in various states of the Government of India on very senior police assignments. He was made responsible by the Government of India to raise a new force called the Rapid Action Force and was appointed as the first chief of this elite force. He was later asked to raise and head the Internal Security Academy, a central police academy at Mount Abu in the state of Rajasthan. During his service, he was decorated with the President Police Medal for Distinguished Service, the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service, Police Special Duty Medal with Bar, a Sena Medal, and a number of other commendations and rewards. After retirement, he was awarded the Security Personality of the Year by the President of India at the Global Security Conference in New Delhi in 2009. He is advisor to the Asian Professional Security Association, the Indian chapter, and is the Honorary Director General to CAPSI, which is the Central Association of Private Security Industry in India, and the Association of Private Detectives and Investigators. Mr. Sipal's face is well known in India as a dynamic security professional who has been interviewed many times on the national news channels. This, ladies and gentlemen, was our president. Our first speaker of the day is Mr. A.B. Tripathi. Mr. Tripathi has a flair for public speaking. He retired as the Director General of Police, Odisha. He was on deputation to the Government of India and was convener to the committee for introduction of computerization of immigration records. He has undergone training courses at the National Police College in the United Kingdom and has been attached to Scotland Yard for extensive training. He was also sent to Tokyo by the government and Los Angeles and New York to study the information technology systems in use in the police forces. He remained attached with the FBI headquarters at Washington to study police application in information technology. He remained Director General of Police Vigilance before taking over as Director General of Police, Odisha. He has also remained in the National Human Rights Commission as a special rapporteur for a period of 6 years. He represented India 3 times in various Interpol conventions. He was a member of the Indian Soviet delegation and was a special observer to a UN Convention on Dimensions of Crime and Criminality. He remained chairman of the Ravenshaw University Development Trust for a number of years. He has authored 6 books. his book titled Diaries of a Country Cousin, Policing the Nation, which is a very popular book amongst the police officers. His last book, Trust Redeemed, was released by the former President of India, Shri Pranab Mukherjee, in 2017. He is a renowned English newspaper columnist on contemporary issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. A.B. Tripathi, who is a former Director General of Police, Odisha. Mr. Tripathi. We can't hear you, Tripathi, sir. You're muted. Kindly unmute yourself, please.
Are you able to hear?
Yes, now we can.
Now you can hear, okay. Mr. President and friends, at the outset, I must thank President C. Paul Singh for having given me. Are you able to hear?
Yes,
Are you
sir.
able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Able to hear me? Okay. For having given me this opportunity to speak on this seminal subject. The time given to me is 20 minutes, and I will try to pick and compress as many ideas as possible in this 20-minute speech. Our topic today is perception system. Since corruption has become a universal phenomenon, with India ranking 86 in the corruption index, signifying the fact that the level of corruption in India is very high, perception of corruption in public in our criminal justice system can be taken for granted. But without bemoaning the existence of this corrosive evil, let me try to get into the historical causes as briefly as possible. Whether it is the different wings of the criminal justice system or other departments like revenue, health, education, we try to explain the existing maladies as a part of colonial legacy. True, no doubt. Whereas the colonial government created these agencies to perpetuate their hegemony, the scenario dramatically changed after independence, to which these colonially oriented agencies failed to adjust and change. They are particularly true of various wings of the criminal justice system, which we may say have not gone through the process of reforms, symbolizing the aspirations of the people of a nation, Indian country. Here it will be germane to discuss the agencies, the raison d'etat of their existence, the quality of the service they deliver. While discussing the criminal justice system, we in our times took into account three main agencies: the police, the judiciary, and the prisons, to which the correctional services were added in the 50s. If there is a fourth part, it is the legislature, the fountainhead of all laws which govern the criminal justice system. An important component of police till the 70s was the prosecution of cases in the courts of law and securing conviction. This wing was taken away from police on the ground that the investigating process should not in principle conduct cases of courts, as the whole process would be violative of the sacrosanct policy of separation of powers. How this noble principle wrought havoc in trial of cases will be discussed later. Soon after independence, the euphoria created the vision of a prosperous India, taking a respectable place in the Committee of Nations. The emphasis then was on developmental activities, creating an environment for progress to make India self-sufficient. Our leaders, imbued with the idealism, took India ahead. New departments were created, corporations were created, and they became a part of our textbook. This environment did cover the old colonial organizations like health and education to some extent, even revenue as land reforms were necessary, but kept the criminal justice system completely out of its orbit. Some marginal benefits did accrue to one wing, the prisons, only through the nominations of an intellectual Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, who during his long terms in prison used to see the distress and frustration of prisoners and wrote about them very poignantly. After becoming Prime Minister, he called a well-known expert from the United States who visited India and gave several suggestions, and the Agency of Probation and Correctional Services was created aside the prison department, and the Children Act was formulated in 1960. Police and judiciary remained untouched, presumably because the politicians who were educated in the West and the steel frame of bureaucracy consisting of the ICS and IP and the higher echelons of the judiciary thought that the system was resilient enough to sail through the changes, with a non-interfering set of politicians in power and the top echelons of the bureaucracy following the then golden principle of anonymity. The system perhaps ran fairly satisfactorily in the first decade of independence. But to say that it was free from corruption would be a travesty of truth. By the beginning of the 60s, the weaknesses started showing. A system tailor-made to perpetuate the hegemony of a colonial power was not in a position to fit into a democratic setup in which the Constitution was supreme. It gave fundamental rights to the citizens and guaranteed freedom of speech, thought, assembly, three critical areas which the police were habituated and accustomed to restrict and suppress. It gave right to the citizens to seek redress by going to the highest courts of the states and the union in the shape of writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, and certiorari, and the like. It can be argued that these were there in British system also, but the British, that these were not applicable to the colonies as they were ruled ruthlessly. Since the first wing of the criminal justice system, the police was the most visible area of the government, coming constantly in touch with public, mostly as an adversary and not as a friend. The quantum changes that took place did not see corresponding efforts on the part of the political executive, accentuated by the fact that this still frame of bureaucracy showed not an iota of interest in reorienting the police. Here it must be pointed out, the police leaders had started realizing the need for reform and articulating them, but the effect was marginal. This brings us to cogitate on the basic structure or frame of the criminal justice system. Was it, or is it even now, an organic whole with an umbilical cord binding them together? The answer is no. All the three agencies are separate, exclusive of each other, and functionally interrelated only through the processes of law. Not only there are no connections, there are several factors inhibiting the three wings to rise above narrow departmentalism and build common platforms for smooth administration of justice through reforms. The disconnect is too pronounced to ignore. The judiciary, which has been accorded the highest place in the scheme of things, next only to legislature, maintains a distance of disdain from the police. They have the clout to bring about reforms in the government by influencing the police, which did not take place. There was no such proactivism on the part of judiciary. If I view it critically, my conclusion will be the judiciary itself is not keen for its own reforms. What to speak of their taking the cudgel on behalf of police and the sun shadow department of prisons, which languishes in veritable miasma. This will be evident from the fact that there has been no worthwhile effort to review the criminal legal process till the 90s when the Balimath Committee was constituted. According to Balimath Committee, the trial of cases in the existing adversarial system did not provide scope to the trying magistrate to act on a dynamic basis. With the principle of presumption of innocence on the part of accused in mind, the magistrate hears both the sides and is competent to adopt the softer option of giving benefit of doubt to the accused. After the separation of prosecution and deliberate delay on the part of the political executive to streamline the prosecution, the system reeked with corruption as it flourished on the patronage of politicians in power committed to the party to be thrown out and replaced by a new set of players with another party coming to power. The lawyers appointed as prosecutors with scanty legal knowledge did only disservice to the wing of system, in effect, the penultimate stage of a case. The Balimath Committee, while discussing the fault lines of the adversarial system, recommended partial adoption of the inquisitorial system prevalent in the continent, in which the onus of innocence would lie on the accused. This would envisage a system of prosecutors constantly scrutinizing the investigating process and correcting the flaws and loopholes, so that by the time the charge sheet reaches the court, the chaff is already separated from the grain, and the trial is on the smooth course for facilitating early conclusions. The system would activate the trying court as the emphasis would shift from presumption of innocence of the accused in the existing process to one of quest for truth. In fact, the principle should be quest for truth as opposed to the present system of sitting on trial on the investigative findings of the police, with its vulnerability to political pressure, susceptibility to corruption by taking sides, and perfunctory investigation. This aspect is linked to the strength or lack of it in the evidence gathered by police in a case. The present system relies on proof beyond reasonable doubt, which becomes hard to come by with the dark and darker sides mentioned above, resulting in heavy acquittals. Balimath recommended a median between the existing standard and the one prevalent in the continental system of preponderance of probabilities. It should be the court's conscience, the court's conviction, which means the trying magistrate should be cerebrally involved in satisfying himself about the guilt or innocence of an accused. On investigation of cases by police, Justice Balimath has a whole range of recommendations to streamline it on manpower, introduction of technology, and the allied factors. Similarly, it discusses the prosecution system. Now nearly 20 years have elapsed, and we don't know how much about the implementation of the Balimath Committee report, accepting some cosmetic changes. The crowning irony after the Balimath report was released in public domain was the virulent opposition it met both from the bar and the judges. Status quo for them was ideal. Why create ripples in water? Yet these eminences would, on public platforms, speak loud and hoarse on corruption in police and need for reforms in the criminal justice system. More than 40 years have passed after the National Police Commission gave their report in 1980-81. The so-called implementation of the recommendations, to my mind, appears to be a IWAS only. The present alleged statement of the present Union Home Minister that criminal justice system is in for an overhaul will be taken with a pinch of salt. When all the central enforcement agencies like the CBI, the ED, the Income Tax, the Narcotics Control Bureau are brazenly used by the party in power, pontificating on overall, to say the least, is just laughable. I am yet to touch the last wing, the prisons and the correctional services. I was the first IPS officer to be the IG prisons in Odisha in 1983. Before my joining, a PIL was engineered in the High Court against posting of a police officer as IG, citing the observations of Justice Mullah of Allahabad High Court. But I did join and saw the conditions of the prisons and the staff. Corruption from the rank of warder to the IG prisons, till then one from medical service, was taken as routine, all at the cost of the prisoners. The need for coordinating platform to see the condition of the overflowing under trials, the conflicts and other issues was a crying necessity. There was no such. The district magistrate and the district judge and some non-officials were only visitors, strangely not the SP. What I saw were few reports of the district judges which never dealt with the issue of trial. Over a period of time, there have been improvements as in Odisha, but the basic element remains. Coming to the core issue of perception of public of corruption prevailing in the different wings of the criminal justice system, police can now have comfort in the fact that it is not the lone devil. Other departments are fast catching up. Education and judiciary, considered sacrosanct, which were placed at a higher pedestal in the integrity and rectitude index, are no longer lily white. They make money individually, as a group, as part of a mafia, and at the behest of politicians. In our own times, in the All India services, like the IAS and IPS, corrupt officers were more an exception than a rule. Now, finding an honest officer, it is said, is an exception. In police, there is scope to make money in all possible police activities at low levels. Avenues are aplenty: traffic control, filing FIR, search, seizure, arrest, intimidation, road and area patrolling, padding evidence, raiding liquor dens, brothels, and the likes, and the list will go on. As they go up, nexus forms with the subordinates, accused, and middlemen. Posting to coveted areas is a rich source of income for senior officers and also politicians. It becomes an impenetrable vicious circle, which explodes once in a while, as the alleged goings on in Mumbai police involving the police commissioner and the home minister would show. The image of Mumbai police as an efficient and professional police force has taken a beating that will be difficult to improve. The saddest fact in this sordid saga is the unfolding of the Pandora's box in the domain of judiciary. The Indian Judiciary, one of the most powerful in the world, considered the Holy Grail, is falling to pieces as if through implosion. Corruption in subordinate judiciary was not unusual. When I started holding senior positions in the State Anti-Corruption Bureau in the 70s, complaints against one district judge had shocked and disturbed me. But they had and still have judicial immunity from any inquiry. No case can be filed without the permission of the justice. This only exacerbated the situation, and we heard the corrupt High Court judges, but they enjoy constitutional protection. It is well nigh impossible to impeach judge through constitutional means. But we have come across judges being disgraced and forced to resign, and now it has bugged the highest court of the country, the Supreme Court. Statements and accusations are just flying, not from a renegade like Prashant Bhushan, but from the members of the bench, both retired and serving. While some judges sitting on a dharna in the open, protesting against their highnesses, committing grave procedural impropriety, was an earthquake of sorts. Open statements of 7 retired Supreme Court judges have rocked the credibility of this august institution. These revelations show the rot that is eating into the vitals of the Indian judicial system. The irony is, while other wings like the police and prisons are willing to submit to the process of reforms for whatever worth it might be, the judiciary is determined to remain in its own ivory tower, maybe under the illusion of the self-same rectitude. Added to the above, some of the most disturbing trends which were seen in the days of emergency in the 70s have started raising their tentacles, which in effect is reducing the police and judiciary to its relevance by an immoral set of politicians acting through administrative processes. One such deleterious trend is laying more emphasis on arrest and putting the accused in the prison for an indefinite period. This is more an administrative measure under the garb of legal color, and the intention is not fair investigation, but pleasing the politicians and the powerful people under them. Two high-profile cases illustrated here will give an inkling of the enormous extent of suffering of common people who have no backers, no protectors, no supporters. In such cases, a servile media becomes judge by unleashing a tsunami of half-truths and lies. One case in point is Reha Chakrabarti and her brother being incarcerated not on basis of evidence, but by insertion of legal provisions which a court can ill afford to ignore. This was a case, or I should say a non-case, where state police, CBI, NCB, and the ED made a high-profile presence and groped unsuccessfully to find even a straw. All guidelines on arrest and bail issued by the Supreme Court and the NHRC went for a 6-7. It was high time. It was high time.
Tripathi sir, 1 minute, please.
Ridiculous.
Tripathi sir.
Just 1 minute, 1 minute. Contrast this to the high voltage arrest of TV anchor Arnab Goswami, the blue-eyed newsman of the present political dispensation. After arrest, he hardly stayed in jail. His powerful lawyer took him on bail with promptitude. So these two instances have brought lasting shame to criminal justice system. Friends, I have spoken enough and my time is now off. I take leave and say adieu. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Tripathi sir. What a wonderful talk you've given. And thank you very much. And I now would like to introduce our second speaker of the day, Mr. Mohit Saraf. Mr. Saraf is a lawyer by profession and he heads the organization called Saraf and Partners. His expertise lies in private equity and venture capital, mergers and acquisition, restructuring, insolvency, project energy, and criminal justice. Mr. Saraf has vast and rich experience in mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, insolvency, projects, energy, infrastructure, and private equity practice areas. He has advised major global and Indian companies and several large institutional clients, such as global fund houses, sovereign funds, pension houses, hedge funds. Mr. Saraf has also worked closely with large domestic and international banks and lending houses. He has extensive experience of over 26 years and has been the corporate practice head at Luthra and Luthra Partners law offices, with whom he was associated for more than 26 years and was also instrumental in setting up the firm. He is a member of the National Executive Committee of FICCI and a co-chair of the following FICCI committees, which are Private Equity and Venture Capital Committee, Committee for Corporate Laws, and Stressed Assets Committee. Mr. Saraf has also conducted numerous training and orientation programs for legal professionals, including most recently a refresher course for commercial court judges, organized by the National Judicial Academy, a Government of India training institute primarily for judicial officers, working in the Supreme Court and the High Court during their service. He has also conducted workshops at the National Judicial Academy, Bhopal, as a lead speaker on construction and infrastructure contracts, organized for benefit of the judges. Mr. Saraf has been recognized amongst India's Super 50 lawyers by the Asian Legal Business and awarded the MA Mergers and Acquisition Lawyer of the Year by IFLR 1000 India 2020, and has been recommended as one of Asia's topmost 25 merger and acquisition lawyers. He's also a recipient of various national and international awards and has been consistently ranked as Band 1 merger and acquisition lawyer in Who's and Who Business Lawyers Eminent Practitioner Chambers, Asia Leading Lawyers. Highly regarded as a leading individual by the Legal 500 Distinguished Practitioners Asia Law. Mr. Saraf has authored over 50 publications in various national and international journals and magazines, including most recently working on a book titled Judicial Reforms, The Way Forward, unveiled by Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, Minister of Law and Justice of India. Mr. Saraf undertook the project along with two eminent co-authors, the retired judges of the Supreme Court of India, Mr. Justice Madan B. Lokur and Mr. Justice Arjun Kumar Sikri. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Mohit Saraf.
Thank you, Captain Ahluwalia. Thank you, Preston. I think this is a great opportunity for me to speak to all of you. I am sandwiched between two senior IPS officers, and I think it's a difficult job. I think particularly, I think there's little for me to add on the police and on the prison. So probably I'll pick up the two in between, which is prosecution and judiciary. And obviously there are a lot of challenges, but let me tell you a little bit about my perception. And I think the good part about this entire talk is really none of us are claiming what level of corruption is. What we are talking about public perception. And when we internally in the firm, when we review partners, we do a 360-degree evaluation. And the associates are evaluating partners and partners are evaluating associates. And a lot of time, what really matters is perception. And therefore, I think it is very important. I think sometime when we look at the government of India, whenever there is a ranking on perception, we refuse to believe it because we say this is absolutely wrong. If we have a credit rating for the country, we say this is absolutely incorrect. We are a top great country. But I think what is important is that all of us have to focus on perception, because if you fix the perception, you fix the problem. And I think that's an important part. And Mr. Tripathi did mention that we rank 86 on level of corruption. And what is important is that out of 180 countries, we rank 86. So we are basically the bottom 100, which is very important. And I would say if 5-6 years back, when the government started focusing on ease of doing business, even on ease of doing business, we were ranked around 140 in a rank of 180 countries. And we moved from 140 to almost 63. That was a massive move. But if you look at perception of corruption, we have not moved. In last 7-8 years, we have barely moved 7-8 points. And that is a very important part. So if you see 10, 20, 30 years back, China was below us. And South Africa was known as a corrupt country. Both of them have moved ahead of us. And I think that's an important thing. That it is, I think, which is important is that we need to fix the perception. And we can't refuse and fail to acknowledge the perception and fix it because we believe that our judiciary is very good, or our police is very good, or our prison is very good. That doesn't work anyway. So I would say that's a very important part. And since I'm a business lawyer also, when we work with international companies, and right now you must be watching and you must all be making a lot of money on your investment in stock markets and mutual fund. And you see a lot of foreign monies coming into India. So there is a company which is called Kroll, and they do, what is the biggest worry which international investors think about India? The biggest worry is corruption. And that's a very important part, that is what keeps the CEO up at night. And you know why? Because in the US, if their Indian subsidiary or their partner gets into a corruption or gets involved in payment, even the top CEOs, their jobs can go for a 6, and the company can be put into a heavy penalty. That is their domestic law. So there are US and UK, there are certain countries where the domestic law ensures that when you do business in foreign countries, like if you're an investor in the US, India is a foreign country, then even the companies where you do businesses, your businesses has to be ethical. And that is a very important part. And I will tell you a little bit about that so that we can get a little bit more understanding. But even if you look at the Law Commission way back in 1988, and I think Mr. Tripathi did mention about that they all acknowledge that there is corruption among lawyers and among judiciary. And even I think Mr. Vora, NN Vora committee also acknowledged that certain parts of judiciary have close nexus with mafia. And we don't want to get into that, but I think what is important is these are the perception issues. We don't have absolutely knowledge about the. There was a study which was conducted by Vidhi, and what you did was Vidhi asked and interviewed. I think somebody's on unmute. If somebody can mute, everybody should mute.
Can you please, Pooja, mute Mr. Sipal Singh's phone? I think it's causing a concern.
So I think what Vidhi did was that basically, if you are a lawyer and you're working in the court system, I think it is important to survey you and ask your feedback. So most lawyers were surveyed, high court lawyers, and there was an acknowledgement of a large fact that yes, there is corruption, or there is a perception of a corruption, even at high court level. But that is one part of it. But if you look at, basically, I think move on. I forgot to ask you to move. Next, please. Next page. This is our talk. Next, please. So this is important. When you look at the Supreme Court, I think you followed it up in a fodder scam, the Lalu Prasad scam, the Karnataka mining, the 2G scam. I think you've seen Supreme Court, I think, going very heavy on certain corruptions. Now, have they been very successful? Probably the answer is no. And we will talk a little bit about why they have not been successful. And the other important issue, I think you all know, that in the Vineet Narayan case, that really the Supreme Court took over. I think Mr. Tripathi mentioned that a lot of reform in police has not happened. So we took over about the reform with respect to CBI and started monitoring. Again, there are issues about separation of power, but we'll probably not get there, but at least think about it, that there was an intent of the Supreme Court to at least fix corruption in executive. I don't know about themselves, that's a separate issue, but we will talk about that also. Next, please. So this is very important. So on the face of it, taking money, as Mr. Tripathi said, that you can make money at every place in police, that is one part of the corruption. But I would actually try to scratch a little bit and see what is really the problem. I think the real problem is the judiciary is not able to deliver justice in time. I think that is the real problem. Like today, if you go to a police station to lodge an FIR, it takes time to get it done. Because why? Because they don't have infrastructure. If you look at the police to public ratio, it is very low compared to any developing country. And that is a problem. You don't have an infrastructure in the courts. You don't have infrastructure in the police offices. You don't have infrastructure. You don't have weapons. A lot of these things, you don't have data. You don't have, I would say these are the big issues, which is actually not letting the system work. And that is a more important part, because really at the end of the day, I think I heard a few times that the Indian judiciary and Indian legal system is work that you stay innocent till you're proven guilty. But if you actually look at criminal justice system, you're first punished, you're taken behind, and you're kept there for years before you are sent out. So really, criminal justice system works on the reverse, that you are you are basically assumed to be guilty till you are exonerated by the court. I would say next, please. And this will show you the problem. If you look at the pending criminal courts and cases, 0 to 1 year, it takes 32.79% of the cases. 1 to 3 years, 28.38. 3 to 5, 15.31. And 5 to 10, 14.82. Virtually, we are talking about that 90% of cases take 0 to 10 years. If that is what it is, you can imagine you cannot travel, your restriction, you are in a way through a media trial or otherwise you are already convicted and you are put behind bars. All these things you can say that this is also because of criminality, but I would say this is largely because the system, the capacity building in the legal system, in the police system, in the judiciary has not happened. Infrastructure, I think right now, if you see the way the Chief Justice is giving warning to the law minister and the government that please appoint members in the tribunal. These are very big issues because if there are no people, how will the justice be done? And these are important issues. And that is why, because if you are an innocent person and you are running from pillar to post for 5 years and you're not paid any money, you will definitely presume the counterparty has paid everybody, whether the judge, whether it's the lawyer, whether his lawyer, whether it's the police officer. And that is a bigger problem. In my view, this issue cannot be just fixed by just fixing police and other people and only about corruption, because this is a much significant issue unless we build up capacity building in the legal system. Next, please. If you look at this is an interesting slide, that if you look at why does the court take that long to decide matters? And I would say the three things which stand out. One is that the witness disappeared. You can't find the witness. The other is the accused is absconding. And the third is the lawyers are not there. And I think all these things are very important. It again shows that the system, it's a systematic issue. That the criminal justice system is actually not in a position to handle today's complexity. Next, please. I would say if you look at today, I think we all understand. When I grew up as a child, we knew simple things, that somebody will come, ransack the house, take the money. Today, that doesn't happen. People take money from your bank account. There's a data theft. There's a very different type of things. And in that situation, when you're looking at an Indian Penal Code of 1860, the crime has changed. The way the commissioning of crime has changed. So that if you have an Indian Penal Code of 1860, you have a Criminal Procedure Code of 1973, which is also significantly, world has changed since then. Indian Evidence Acts of 1872. There have been amendments. But what I'm trying to say is that this is a big part which has been ignored very badly. And because this has been ignored, this actually often leads to a collapse, which we always believe it's a corruption, somebody's taking money. Next, please. This is really the next important part which I want to tell you is that even in a case of a corruption, just see the amount of laws, different laws are involved. Prevention of Corruption Act, Money Laundering Act, Companies Act for offenses committed by company, Indian Penal Code, foreign contribution, Lokpal, Lokayukt. So many laws are involved. And you can imagine, you need a Superman to do all these things and make sure that all these things, the prosecution has it. And therefore, what you require is a simplification. Otherwise, dispensation of justice will always be a problem. Next, please. So really, if you come back, if you really have to, perception is bad. We all believe there is a lot of corruption. So therefore, what you need to fix is you have to get judges appointed. I think there is a big mindset among litigants because they feel that nobody will get prosecuted and convicted. So at least keep dragging. Then their judges have to be evaluated. I think we all get evaluated. IPS officers get evaluated. Judges also need to be evaluated and given feedback. I think this is a very important part. This was part of our National Judicial Academy recommendation which we gave it to the Prime Minister as well. Next, please. I think the inefficient court process is a very big thing, because remember, judges are good in reading law, but they can't manage courts. And this thing needs to be given to a CEO to manage it. I think somehow we are always in this nation against delegation. If you look at Malaysia, which is actually follows the Indian law largely, they have given a court system to a CEO, like a KPMG, and it's running it. The processes. So you know when your matter will come, you can do filing. A lot of these things can be given up. And I don't think this is really any way encroaching on independence of judiciary. Next, please. So I would say, I will just end up and saying is that you have understood that government, India's perception is bad and it has not improved. And in this India, there is corporate India. And I will talk a little bit about, because you see among emerging market, corporate India is actually ranks among the developing country pretty high. And I think I want to talk about this a little bit. So, because if you make money by being corrupt, then you end up being corrupt. But if you end up making money by being honest, you end up being honest. And what I'm trying to say here is, if today's private equity and listed company markets give much more valuation to honest companies, high governance companies. And that is the reason today, corporate India and SEBI and other organizations have brought in such high level of disclosure that today we don't have those type of scandals which used to happen 10 years back, and things have improved. And that is what is very important. So corporate India was quite active in corruption. That has come down a lot. But in last few years, because of valuation in the market, if Tata's are, if Infosys is highly organized company, and now they are coming up with an ESG, which is environment, social, and governance ranking. And this will help company raise capital. So what I'm trying to say is that really at the end of the day, you have to incentivize people to be honest. The corporate India was incentivized. They have started behaving in a much more responsible manner. And same thing we have to do it for judiciary, for police, for prison. And I think just thinking about somebody's making money, we are just talking about a tip of a problem. Delay, keeping people behind bars for years is actually nothing but corruption. Lawyers taking 20 briefs and not showing up for the client is nothing but corruption. And unless we look at all these things together, I don't think we'll solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohit. What an excellent talk. And now I have the honor and privilege of introducing Dr. Vikram Singh, who's our third speaker of the day. Dr. Vikram Singh is a former officer of the Indian Police Service from the 1974 batch. He is a former Director General of Police, Uttar Pradesh, which has the largest police force in the world of 190,000 people. He is one of the most highly decorated police officers in the country, who has relentlessly fought against national, international terrorist outfits and organized crime syndicates. He's directly worked for the modernization and adoption of state-of-the-art technology and universal best practices to make police effective and people-friendly. He's rated as a star trainer and speaker on issues related to security, man management, crisis resolution, team building, and values ethics. He's completed MSc from the Allahabad University in 1972 and a PhD in ecology from the Kanwau University in 1990. He's currently working as Chancellor of Noida International University. He's been a guest speaker at over 50 prestigious national, international institutions, as well as highly valued and reputed multinational organizations. He has several publications to his name. He has a book entitled Ecosystems of Central Himalayas, Human Rights and Police, Chambal Dacoits, Baghis or Bandits, yes, the black canopy of mental slaughter. Yes, he's a TEDx speaker and has got many awards and accolades and has been mentioned in the Limca Book of Records as the most highly decorated police officer in India. I now present, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Vikram Singh.
Thank you very much, Captain Ahluwalia. Mr. President, Mr. Sripal Singh sir, distinguished delegates, my job has been made very simple because I speak after two icons, Mr. Amir Bhushan Tripathi of the police and Mr. Mohit Saraf of the legal department. Therefore, I have nothing but to just repeat the sumptuous takeaways from the brilliance and the eloquence of these two wonderful speakers. They have a saying in Uttar Pradesh, Bad Acha, Badnaam Bura. And this is what perception is all about. Perception, the ground reality may be something else. But if the perception is to the contrary, perception is what matters. But I would be failing in my duty if I were to say that everything is hunky and dory in the police, prisons, and the judiciary. I would not like to utter a word negatively about the judiciary because I've been trained as a disciplined police officer to only speak in the positives. But yes, as a citizen, it's also my duty to tell me where the fault lines are, and there are horrible fault lines. There are horrible fault lines. Mr. Mohit Saraf was very kind and magnanimous when he said FIRs are not lodged because there is acute shortage of manpower. There is also some technological gap. There is also a dearth of the backup facilities. But this ingredient of not lodging FIRs has almost become epidemic. It is difficult for any person sitting amongst us. When I say amongst us, it includes all of us. Let him lodge an FIR in Delhi or the NCR. It is like climbing the Mount Everest. It is not rocket science. 154 CRPC very clearly mentions that FIR is a right. But the moment a person enters a police station, it comes at a price. Lodging an FIR comes at a price. I will give you several points where the touch points are and whether the element of corruption is there or not. Going to a police station and getting a complaint registered, does it entail a cost or not? Yes or no? Getting the right ingredients of the IPC incorporated, whether it is attempt to commit murder or a simple injury, does it cost money or it comes 323, 325, 307? Does it come at a cost or it comes absolutely free of cost? There are no free lunches. Then the investigation, if the investigation has to be completed expeditiously, does it come free of cost? A professional investigation incorporating all the eyewitnesses and all the documentary evidence, is it free of cost or does it come at a price? I leave it to the judgment of the distinguished viewers. Then charge sheeting or final report. As an investigator of a police station, he has the option of going in for a deal with both the complainant and the accused. And whoever has deeper pockets perhaps gets one over. Whoever has the deeper pockets. Now we come to the prosecution part. When the brief is being made, the next level of corruption starts. कागज में वजन नहीं है. कागज में वजन नहीं. There is no weight on the paper. So the weight comes only after you'll understand why and what is being hinted at. Once that weight has been given, then you have, suppose there is a prosecutor, he prepares a brief, incorporates all the loose ends, the case goes to a court. And when it goes to the court, are the witnesses hostile? Are they made hostile? Have statements under 164 CRPC recorded? I have my doubts. And that is what speaks volumes of the large number of acquittals that take place. Tariq pe tariq, date after date, date after date. One feels it was better off not going to the court of law rather than going to the court of and spending sleepless nights and being poorer by spending almost half the legacy and half my bank balance on a simple case. Then our senior prosecutors, whether they're the standing counsels or additional advocate generals, comparison should be between comparables. Here, on the private side, you have the best of the best, brilliant advocates like Mohit Saraf ji. Our advocates and advocates on record and additional advocate general do not stand a ghost of a chance against brilliant lawyers like Mr. Mohit Saraf. That is why I say comparison should be between comparables. Now, judiciary, Mr. A.N. Mullah was mentioned by Mr. Amir Bhushan Tripathi. Mr. A.N. Mullah is on record to have said that the UP police is the largest gang of gundas in the world. It was, of course, the remark was expunged. But I would not like to believe what I'm told about the judiciary. I hold the judiciary in the highest esteem, and I would be the last person to utter something negative. But a word to the wise is enough. In a very important case pertaining to a conglomerate of Uttar Pradesh, a multi-level Ponzi scheme, accused of multi-level Ponzi scheme, who sent truckloads of documents to the Supreme Court. And there was a publication that said, I'm given to understand that the judgment is already ready and I'm printing that judgment. The judgment will be out next Monday and I'm printing it on Sunday. I do hope I am wrong, that this is not the judgment that will go. And lo and behold, that was the very judgment that came on Monday. So this was the level of compromise that was hinted by that advocate when he came out with that publication. But that was by way of an exception. I do hope that it was indeed an exception. But the fact of the matter is that the lofty ideals of the judiciary, there are horrible fault lines everywhere. Beginning from the police to the prosecution to the prison, they say that the veritable hell on earth, if one has to see, one has to just to go to the prison house. In a capacity of a prison that has just 100, there would be 500 inmates, 1:5. There'd be any number of cases of sexual exploitation, extortion, bribery, corruption, you name it, and that misdemeanor can be found in the confines of the jail. Mr. Amir Bhushan Tripathi mentioned the case of Riya Chakravarti and also other people. That, of course, may have been the case. But by and large, the public perception is, show me the man and I will show you the rules. Corruption has multiple dimensions. In northern India, say the corruption is of 3 types. Shukrana, gratitude. Once the job is done, the person does not ask for anything, but he gets something in return. Quid pro quo, that is known as Shukrana. Then there is Nazrana. That is when the bribe is asked and the price is fixed. I will charge sheet the case, 10 lakhs. That is Nazrana. Then the third is Zabrana, extortion, as happened, as Mr. Tripathi mentioned, in the case of Police Commissioner Mumbai, Sachin Waze, Pradeep Sharma, and the ex-Home Minister Anil Deshmukh, who were actually running an extortion racket in the Police Commissioner's office and targeting the eateries for a collection of 100 crores a month. What a crying shame. Mumbai police at one point of time was compared with the Scotland Yard, one of the best police forces in the world. And look at the depravity. Of course, the police commissioner, the then police commissioner, cannot be the brand ambassador of the Indian Police Service, nor the brand ambassador of the Maharashtra Police. But the irreparable damage that he has done to the police, I mean, we are shocked beyond words that the damage done to the credibility of the police, indeed, it will be decades and decades, if at all, one can regain the vestiges of the credibility and the dignity of the police. The police reforms, let us come to the police reforms. Starting from the Fraser Commission in 1902, let us come to, after independence, the Dharamveera Commission, the Police Commission, the Padmanabhaiya Committee, and Ribeiro Committee. Then the Prakash Singh case of 2006, Prakash Singh versus Union of India, a very simple 7-point directives by the Honorable Supreme Court, which all the states were duty bound to comply with. A serving Chief Justice of India says, what can I do when the chief ministers of the states are not cooperating with me? I fail to understand how can the serving Chief Justice of the country feel helpless. Just summon the DGP and the chief secretaries, make them contemners of the court, and lo and behold, the police reforms will be enforced and ensured before you can say Jack Robinson. I had an opportunity to speak to many politicians of almost every political party. And I asked them, why are you so reluctant to enforce police reforms? And that was one-to-one on the basis of a free and frank discussion. Irrespective of party lines, every senior member of every political party said, Mr. Vikram Singh, the day police reforms are enforced in the country, I'll have to look for another profession. My politics is totally dependent on the corrupt and the decadent and the decayed system of the police that we have just now. That is what is oxygen to our politics. Bereft of this policing, our politics will come to naught. At the current juncture, I can lodge an FIR the way I want. I can prevent the lodging of an FIR. I can get a person to be arrested. I can have him beaten to pulp. I can get him behind bars for frivolous charges. Mr. Mohit Saraf will be privy to the fact that we had the 13th Criminal Law Amendment Act in 2013. After the best legal brains of the country collected together and amended the Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Evidence Act, the three acts that Mr. Mohit Saraf mentioned in his PPT. And what is the end product? The end product is that there's a very important section, 166A in the Indian Penal Code, that was introduced for the specific purpose that if there is a delinquent police officer who fails to do his duty in matters pertaining to sexual offenses, such a person would be liable to be charged under 166A of the Indian Penal Code. And there's an imprisonment of 6 months, meaning thereby that the police officer loses his job and goes to jail for 6 months. I would like to ask, it's a very vibrant panel, very well-informed viewers, how many cases of 166A IPC have been lodged in the country?
Yes.
Very good. I'm happy that somebody has the moral strength to say that we have not lodged a single case. And the fact of the matter is that it is a well-nigh impossible task to lodge a case of rape, a molestation, and prevention of sexual harassment cases at a police station. And not a single case of 166A. To the contrary, the vernacular language in northern India is, somebody says that he took a lawyer with him to the police station. That is why the perception of dishonesty and corruption. With a lawyer, say, aap kis dhara, under which section of law are you booking him? You know the audacity of the station house officer. साहब ये देखो, ये IPC है, इसमें 500 धाराएं हैं, एक आपके ऊपर मारेंगे, 25 धाराएं आपके ऊपर गिरेंगी. I throw the book of IPC on you. There are more than 500 sections, and more than 25 sections of all chapters will be on you, and it will be difficult for you to extricate yourself of the charges that I bring upon you. Mr. Mohit Saraf mentioned about integrity. Integrity in the corporate world, integrity in the police, integrity in the judiciary. Yesterday, profits were earned through expediency. Today, profits will have to be earned only with integrity. Yesterday, value was extra. Today, value is everything. And when Mr. Mohit Saraf said this about the corporate world, I dare say about the police. Our credibility is at an all-time low. This is a wake-up call, and I must thank Mr. Sipal Singh Sahab, Captain Ahluwalia, to bring up this topic. I could have also whispered sweet nothings into everyone's ears, but I would have failed in my duty if I did not come out with the bitter and the ugly truths. It is a wake-up call for all us to realize when in 1974, when I joined the IPS, I was warned by my superiors that there are 3 officers in a cadre of 350 who are not very straight. 3 officers out of 350 who are not very straight. It has been hinted by Mr. Ami Bhushan Tripathi, Mr. Saraf. Today, if we were to find out how many officers are those whose integrity is beyond doubt and above board, I leave the answers to you. I will not answer it for you. It is for you to answer. It is very difficult. When you have the likes of Paramveer, Sachin Waze, Pradeep Sharma, yesterday it was honorable to be frugal, but it was appropriate and right to be honorable. It's good to be frugal and honorable than to be dishonest and ostentatious. Today, it is fashionable to be ostentatious because the ends justify the means. This wasn't the case yesterday. I have seen brilliant lawyers, brilliant police officers, brilliant prosecutors, brilliant, being extremely frugal, but yet most honorable. And yes, we need to set our own houses in order. When I say own houses in order, let us not talk about politicians. Let us only talk about the prosecutors. Let us only talk about the prisons. Let us only talk about the lawyers. Let us only talk about the police. Beginning from the police, which is the foundation and the first interaction of the complainant with the government and the criminal justice system, the least one can do is the word used in section 154 CRPC. If the petition discloses the commission of a cognizable offense, the station house officer shall register a case. There is no option given to the station house officer. He has to lodge an FIR. It is the question of the leadership of the police also. I would say that there are no bad soldiers. There are only bad generals. If the leadership is strong and has a no-nonsense approach to administration, I can very well say that corruption can be scaled down to at least 60. I don't say it can be finished, but it can be made zero. But yes, it can come down to by at least 60 to 70%. FIRs will be lodged. There will be no extortion. There will be corruption, but there will be no extortion. There will be no rapes in the police station. A simple thing like having CCTVs in the police station. Why are we so reluctant to install CCTVs? Knowing fully well that it's only a matter of time, we can only mark time. But the CCTVs will have to be installed in police station, prisons, ED, CBI, and all the law enforcement agencies. But the reluctance goes to show that there is something that I have to conceal, that there is something that can be called my private practice, the obnoxious way. And then again, for the benefit of the learned viewers, there are those who say, do you think that I will extort and take money in the viewfinder of the CCTVs? The CCTVs can go awry. They can become defective. I can hang my lungi on the lens of the CCTV. Where there is a will, there is a way. And it is here that I question the police leadership. Bring out the butcher in you. Don't compromise on corrupt practices. You are accountable to your conscience. Don't fail your conscience and don't fail your family pedigree and don't fail the country. Once the police leadership is there, at least this part of corruption of investigation, lodging of FIR can be scaled down to 70%. Let us not blame the people. Let him cast the first stone who has not sinned before. Let us not blame the press. Let us not blame the media. Let us not blame anyone. Turn the searchlight inward and see if the criticism or the perception has any depth, has any substance, because there is substance. There is no smoke without fire. And here it is all a bonfire. Turn the searchlight inward and see where the course correction can begin. The course correction begins from us. Let us be honorable. Let us abide by the government servant conduct rules. We are supposed to, once having joined the service, we are supposed for 36 years, the government looks after us and then gives us a pension. There is no need to go with a begging bowl. And once the leadership is firm, the policing and the prosecution are taken care of. A vibrant citizenry, vibrant and brilliant advocates like Mr. Mohit Sarafji and the guardianship of eminent thinkers like Captain Ahluwalia, Sipal Singh Sahab and others, Ami Bhushan Tripathi sir. I think they are icons and a lighthouse. There is no looking back. Honesty has to be a premium. Honesty is indeed not the best policy. It is the only policy. Zero tolerance to corrupt and dishonest practices. And that is what one has to be cruel to be kind. Sacrifice all those who are in the gray area, those who are, in fact, have patronized dishonest means. With these words, I thank you all very much for listening to me so patiently. Thank you so much, Captain Ahluwalia. Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Just a questions popped up. The hours of policing that a constable or the inspector does in a day far exceeds the number of hours that he should be doing. And one of the reasons why he does extra hours is because he puts money into his pocket. Any comments on this, sir?
Not necessarily. Ask Mr. Sipal Singh and ask me. I retired 10 years ago. Even today, I can't sleep before 1 a.m. because my biological clock has been set. I cannot sleep because whole of 36 years, I would sleep only at 1 a.m. It doesn't mean that every time I slept at 1, my pocket was extra. To the contrary, my pocket was more empty. It will be presumptuous and it will be a sweeping generalization. I don't say that everybody who works overtime is indeed an epitome or an angel. But yes, there are compulsions. You are answerable to yourself. And in the police, the DGP down to the constable, everybody works. I said, I'm not the only person who works till 1 a.m. The DGP down to the constable, everybody works at 1 a.m. And that is a part of the ecosystem and the work culture of the police department all over the country, not in UP, not in Kashmir, but all over the country. That does not necessarily mean that every person who works beyond 8 hours is indeed lining his and feathering his own nest. No, it doesn't happen that way. Thank you.
Thank you. President, sir, would you like to add something? Mr. Sipal Singh.
I think I totally endorse what Dr. Vikram Singh has said. In no uncertain terms, he has exposed the present police functioning. He very clearly said that once upon a time, corruption was an exception. Now honesty is an exception. He clearly said that there was smoke before the fire. Now there's fire and fire everywhere. So I totally endorse it.
You use the word bonfire.
Very, very nice display.
We have a question from Mr. Sanjay Rikhi. Sanjay, please ask your question.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And
You've got two devices on. Can you switch off one, please?
okay. Yeah, what I would like to request.
Sanjay, please switch off one device.
Yeah. After a very, I think, eye-opening session and the presentations given by our learned speakers, one thought which lingers my mind is to really be curious in knowing the reforms which are being formulated. What is the roadmap on the reforms to really see that the public perception changes towards corruption in justice system? And learning from whatever I could hear out from the learned speakers, that there are various enforcement machineries which are working. And in each of the enforcement machinery, there are systemic changes which are being done or which are required to be done. If the learned speaker could throw some light on that, which could give us a silver lining towards changing the perception of the public towards corruption and justice.
I think let me answer a little bit because.
Sir, you are muted, sir. Mohit, sir, please, if you could.
Mohit is on. Mohit, sir,
I'm not.
We can hear Mohit.
Okay. So the way I have been working very closely with FICCI and the government of India on some of the reform issues. And what I see is that the government was thinking that India's ranking will improve significantly just by doing few things. And like what I mentioned, that we have actually gone way below China and South Africa and all other things. And the other countries have moved up, whether it's an enforceability of contract or whether it's perception of corruption. Both we are down. And therefore, I think the government realizes that unless they make significant change in law, in legal system, in all reforms, nothing is going to move. Because in 7 years, we have just moved 5 places. And I think now it's an important thing that if they need to, because at the end, the government has made a thing that they want to be a $5 trillion economy and $10 trillion economy by 2035. If they need to get anywhere close to that, they need to improve governance and they have to improve perception. Otherwise, we will not get to $5 trillion, $10 trillion even by 2040. And therefore, I feel that this is the first time I see there is an economic compulsion to do reform. All this time, it was only a compulsion for certain reasons. Now you can't get employment, you can't get money in the country, you can't raise capital because you're not doing that. And once you have the ESG rating, people will just not put money in non-compliant countries and non-compliant countries. And therefore, unless you have an economic compulsion, nobody moves. I think status quo, as the previous speaker spoke, status quo works very well for political bosses. So I would say now there is an economic compulsion. The way the corporate India, from 2G scam, from Colgate scam, they've become more compliant in the last few years. I would say this will also move because they have to create jobs, and jobs cannot be created by government. So I would say there's an economic compulsion, and that is the reason today I'm more confident that judiciary, if you see last few months, fair amount of people have been appointed to higher judiciary. I think this has to, now the capacity building has to happen. I think all these things would happen. Then I would say just getting the integrity right will not solve the problem. If you have an ability to have two meanings to a law, then it works with that person because he can take any view. He can put you behind the bar or not be. And therefore, what you require is laws have to be very strictly worded, where you can't throw an IPC and put 25 dharas on a person. You can't do that. It has to be so closely worded. The ingredients have to be so clear, and you have to have a defined officer being punished. And I think as long as you're doing all these things, then only you'll have a rule of law. And right now, we always take pride that we have democracy and rule of law, but a lot of these basic ingredients are missing. So I would say I feel excited because I see economic compulsion coming for the first time. And because there is economic compulsion, things will change.
Dr. Vikram Singh, your add-ons and comments on this?
Again, I would say that there is a leadership, and we have anti-corruption departments like the anti-corruption department in every state, the vigilance department, the watchdogs, that there is also Lok Ayog, there is also the CBI, the ED, there are other. But again, it's good to have a weapon. If I do not know how to use a weapon, or I have the tendency of misusing the weapon, then the entire purpose of having that organization is defeated. The CBI, no other than the Supreme Court, it is a paged carrot. There cannot be a worse indictment than to be called a paged carrot. I do hope the paged parrot is released from the cage and indeed allowed the freedom to have the discretion, work on the discretion, work on merits. But to be a caged parrot is perhaps the worst predicament that can possibly happen to any law enforcement agency. Indeed, I would say the leadership, a vibrant press, a vibrant judiciary are the three ingredients, and the rule of law by far is the best legacy for any free society or a democracy. And indeed, since we have inherited it through our constitution, it's our duty, bound in duty, to ensure that all the organizations, the law enforcement, the investigators, the prosecutors, the judiciary, worked faithfully towards that one goal, giving us the freedom that we deserve. That is our birthright.
One question that I have is, generally the investigations in the police department are done at the SHO and below that level. Is that level actually competent to carry out investigations? Because many of the cases don't get conviction in the courts. Is it because of competency issue or the level at which these cases are investigated?
Captain Ahluwalia, yes and no. Yes, 70% of the cases, the SHO is competent. But when it comes to cyber crime, when it comes to other corporate crime, I don't think SHO or even a deputy SP is competent enough to investigate the case. In now many of the cases, SC/ST Act, Dowry Act cases, cyber crime cases, it has to be a guested level officer. And again, there had to be a team of people to investigate the case, those who are technologically proficient, those who have the corporate. Suppose there is a scam pertaining to the stock market. Do you think for a moment, what to talk of the SHO, even the superintendent of police or the DIG would have it in him to address the corporate frauds running into millions or hundreds of crores of rupees? The officer would develop spontaneity reading ream after ream and ream after the files that will be brought before him. And that is the purpose of producing such voluminous data, that the officer will go senile, will go insane by the time he's through with the investigation. No. There have to be experts of the income tax department, the chartered accountants. They have to be part of the core team of investigators. The days when you had just one investigator who could do justice to an investigation are now over. For 70% of the ordinary petty theft like bicycle theft, burglary and dacoities, yes. But the other 30% of specialized crime, you have to have specialized investigators. And that is why the predicament that we are in, what worked yesterday will not work today, Captain Ahluwalia.
Dr. Singh, just let me add one small thing. In US, there is a regulator of stock market, which is called SEC. Its counterpart of India is SEBI. And once, a long time back, the US government appointed somebody who was playing with the stock market as a SEC chief. And it was really heavily criticized. And I think what you rightly said, that the president then said that you need a thief to catch a thief. And absolutely correct, that unless you understand how things are commissioned, what are the processes, how do you take money out of the country, how do you do hawala, otherwise you will always have, you remember in 2G scam, you had long investigation and everybody has been acquitted. Now people can say it is corruption. I would definitely say, I would not say competence, but I would say lack of training. I think if you don't train people, and I think today I can't handle, I have a 12-year-old daughter. If I want to monitor her, I cannot monitor her because I'm outdated. And I would say if I can't monitor my daughter, how can a cops monitor with the old technique, the modern crime? And I would say it's a very important thing. The laws have to change, the investigative techniques have to change, the training has to change, the mindset has to change, and then you will find a compliant society.
Pawanji, I wish I could be as honest and straight as Mr. Mohitji is. I tried to snoop around because I'm a chancellor of a university and I have a no-nonsense approach to my students. I tried to block all the pornographic sites. I tried to block every objectionable site, but I have failed miserably, and as seldom have I failed in my life. But this is one area, like you, I have also failed. Therefore, pick the best man for the job, who is a professional who will be able to do it. I'm much more out of date than you are as far as IT skills are concerned. IT is not my strong point, and therefore I would say that perhaps get the best person for the job if a task has to be achieved. Thank you, Captain Ahluwalia sir.
Sarabjit, you have a question. Please ask your question, Sarabjit. You are muted, Sarabjit. Unmute yourself first.
I don't have a question. I just shared my thoughts on the thing. That's all.
All right, that's fine. Anyone has any other question, Gurinder?
Sir, my question has been answered, sir. I had one, but it was already answered by Dr. Vikram. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. I think, President sir, we run out of time also, and I hand the proceedings back to you to conclude the session. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes, now I'm unmuted.
Yes, now we can hear you.
I wish that most of the officers become unmuted like Dr. Vikram Singh. First point is this. Once you asked me to unmute, the first point is that they should become unmuted. There's a hush-hush thing everywhere. The most important point I like to emphasize in 2 minutes is that Mr. Tripathi has delineated beautifully as to how the system was handed over to us from the colonial days and how we have tried to change. And he has also referred to the poignant remarks of the intellectual Prime Minister, Mr. Nehru, on this. Despite all the efforts, we still continue to have that level of inefficiency coupled with corruption. And Mr. Mohit has emphasized basically on the systemic changes. The systemic changes means he means the laws are not correct or laws are correct, but they're voluminous of law. Probably a summary may have to be made for so many laws are there, and it's a one legal system, one provision and other provision, you have to be very efficient. And Dr. Vikram Singh, in his usual eloquent way, has also referred to, I must say, when we joined the police, we had referred to Justice Mullah, and Justice Mullah's remarks about the police was expunged subsequently. But Dr. Vikram Singh has probably re-emphasized his remarks once again. I think the weapon as such, we are blaming the weapon all the time. Okay, the laws are wrong, this thing wrong, the weapon is there. The sharpening of the weapon is also required. Yes, you have to have very well-trained people who should do with investigation and all. But what about sharpening your conscience? What about standing against corruption? We are ready to blame everyone except ourselves. That is the main reason. And secondly, I must emphasize here that he has very nicely pointed out to the CBI, which was created for this purpose, that it was absolutely impartial. And it has become a parrot in the cage, he has referred, Dr. Vikram Singh. So all these points clearly refer to that there's not only the need of systemic changes, there's not only the need of streamlining certain laws, but there's also the need for streamlining ourselves. That is, the persons who are dealing with the criminal justice system. I will just refer one point and finish it. You have number of police commissions, and the police commission reports are catching dust at most of the places. The police commission reports have never been attended to. Why? Because the states want, as he rightly, Dr. Vikram said, states want police as an oxygen for them. That is, they need oxygen to carry on, and this oxygen is available for craft police officer. So with these words, I would like to say that it's a very illuminating session, very scintillating session, and I am very happy that we invited all the three speakers. I very beautifully, Mr. Tripathi has referred right from the pre-colonial days. These are delineated till date, that is what happened in Bombay. I mean, starting from A to Z, he has covered the entire gamut where the corruption could be. Mr. Mohit has beautifully explained as to what are the systemic changes, what are the changes required in law. And hats off to always to my dear friend, Dr. Vikram Singh, who blames himself in a way. That is, being a police officer, he says that we are to be blamed. And let us see that set our house in order. With these words, I thank all the speakers for having come on my invitation here, particularly the speakers who were like Mr. Tripathi, who was not very well, still he agreed. Now, our next webinar is scheduled on 24th of September. And this webinar again is on very important subject. Rights and duties are two sides of the same coin. It's a political thesis. Also, I think as a citizen rights and the duties, you can say rights and duties of any individual, rights of duties of any parents and child, rights and duties of any profession. So rights and duties are two sides of the same coin. A very, very interesting subject which can cover gamut of all sectors of our society, all business enterprises, all citizens and all. And this is due on 24th September. We are getting two very illustrious speakers. We are getting them. And I'm sure our delegates who have today attended this webinar will be very happy to join this. With these words, again, I thank all the delegates, as well as the speakers, as well as Mr. Pamana Ahluwalia for giving me the opportunity to select this particular subject, which has evoked so much interest. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, speakers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sipal, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.